those aspects of creating a relationship is gone.
They may never actually have a face-to-face meeting with the lawyer on the other side.
Them being on Zoom is a different skill set than them going down to the courthouse.
But the problem is, are we now looking toward Zoom trials, or are we still going to have trials in person and juries?
Hey, I'm Tom Morgan with the Morgan Law Group. And in this episode of Trial and Error, me and my father are going to be discussing the aspects of growth of law firm, staffing, technology, and what goes into it. Check us out.
Getting back to what we were initially talking about, well, if the places for lawyers to meet and get together don't exist today like they did, and people that are probably watching and listening to this weren't even born in 1965, 70, 75, and 80. So it's kind of meaningless to discuss that era so much. Where do you socialize or meet and interchange with other lawyers for one, an exchange of ideas, number one, and two, to develop a relationship with them so that it assists you in handling your cases because they'll be on the other side, or maybe they can provide information or experts to assist you in your case because they're on the same side or had a similar case?
Yeah, I mean, I've been very proactive the last few years to be involved in some organizations that are just based for lawyers. And those organizations are predominantly with lawyers from around the country. And so it allows me to socialize with people not necessarily doing the same type of practice as myself, but at least lawyers that are managing firms, in many cases, or they're higher up associates at certain firms, and sharing some ideas and creating some relationships there with those people that I do reach out to them and say, hey, I'm dealing with this in my office, and what are you dealing with? Or I'm seeing this from insurance companies. Do you guys have this going on, or are you dealing with it? But in regards to creating a relationship with the people that we're having cases with on a daily basis that are on the other side, it's very difficult because for as many things that I do go to, they aren't necessarily events that are bringing together everybody. You generally are seeing groups that are, even if the local bar association group, a lot of times, a lot of those people are not the people you're practicing with. Those are just the people who have their offices in that market. So, if I go to the Gables Bar Association, there's family law and there's a lot of real estate lawyers and there's a lot of other, but I'm not necessarily seeing the defense lawyers that I have cases with. So I don't know. I mean, those aspects of dealing with and creating a relationship is gone. What I have now is those handful of cases that I'm more active in. And because I'm dealing with the other side maybe a little bit more, I can start to create a rapport. And I think part of that also is as the firm owner, when I'm dealing on a case, I think those people are probably taking a little bit more active role in it as well. And so there is more of a ability to talk that maybe my associates aren't having with the associates that work under those people.
How about live seminars or the Florida Bar Convention? Do you find that there's any assistance in developing relationship amongst the lawyers at those facilities or events? I've gone over the years. I've gone to a few, and the problem you have is the bar association things are generally very large scale. You're getting a large group of people from all over the state, and so you're going there, and if you don't really already know certain people, you're not really starting to create a new relationship because people are talking and so forth. And, you only get your 10, 15-minute break here and there. So you kind of tend to focus towards the people you maybe have already met in the past or already know. I try to send some of the associates to those things. They come back. I don't get the feedback that they're really going out of their way to try and meet new people. And then when you go to the ones that are focused more on,
your practice area, like, the Plaintiff Bar Association here, FJA, you go to those events, and I think there's more camaraderie between them because everybody is sort of trying to, usually those events are trying to discuss the problems that are going on the other side. But I don't necessarily know that we're having things that allow you to create those new relationships that are in general with the other people.
I've seen in some of the files at the office that a lawyer can handle the file and basically will deal with the client over the telephone for everything that they need and then meet them for the deposition. But depositions will be handled on a Zoom. The motions and hearings are on a Zoom. And unless the case goes to trial, they may never actually have a face-to-face meeting with the lawyer on the other side. So there's no real opportunity for somebody to shake hands and develop a relationship because it's just a face on a screen. And they're very pleasant on the screen, but it isn't really the same as sitting down and having, a cup of coffee or having some dead time where you have to talk about something other than the case where a relationship gets developed. Is that where the practice of law is going, that all the lawyers are now going to live in a shell? Okay.
The lawyers are living in the video bubble. It's that really is the big hurdle right now that I keep trying to stress to the lawyers is, I've got these lawyers. 80% of the practice is probably done over Zoom or a phone. You can have the lawyer can take a really good deposition, but them being on Zoom is a different skill set than them going down to the courthouse and being in front of a judge and having to argue a motion. The aspect of creating a bond with your own client, you may have multiple conversations. You may talk to them on the Zoom, but you're right. Unless it's on a personal injury case where it's very traumatic, major injury, for the most part, those clients are talking to us. They don't even want to come to the office. They themselves prefer the Zoom and dealing with it, but it doesn't allow you to really create that relationship or that bond with them. And it doesn't allow you to maybe learn something about them that maybe could be useful if you really had that relationship.
What I first of all, I agree with you. I think that there is a difference in the approach and preparation when, say, it's a deposition or even a motion hearing, when it's Zoom versus in person. I remember taking way back we called them video depositions, right. And you'd have to go downtown to the few offices that had
it would be a huge setup like we're doing here today.
Yes, videography things, and the person would go to an office that had it, and they would skyline the thing through a satellite. And the way you asked questions was a little bit different. And of course, if you had documents that you had to use, you needed to get them to the other location, a day or two in advance. FedEx was, new, but it existed, but that's what you did. You FedExed everything so that everybody had it. But it didn't go as smoothly as when you were right there asking the question. But the problem is, are we now looking toward Zoom trials, or are we still going to have, trials in person and juries?
Well, one of the key things I keep telling people is that if you're a litigator and a trial lawyer, at least for the foreseeable future, we're going to still be needed. Because I do feel that, they tried the Zoom trials during COVID, and it was a very weird thing. I think that people, when they say they want their day in court, they want to actually be in court. They want to see the jury in person who's going to make a decision. And I think, that's their right. And I don't think that we're going to get rid of that. But yes, the rest of it is going to be more and more technology based. Clearly, some of the witnesses now being used during the trial can appear. Some of these judges are allowing the witness to appear by Zoom, where in the past, it was a scheduling nightmare to try and get your expert to be available because he had to be at some other trial or he had his family vacation and didn't want to show up for trial when you got pushed back a week, so his schedule was out of whack. So it's awesome, the technology, and it's getting better and better, and I'm trying to keep up with it. But at the same time, it does mean that we're losing the interaction. And I think the important part that needs to still be the aspect of a case when you say you're going to trial is that the jury is there live, and that your client, as well as whoever the defendant is, needs to be there and sort of have their day in court and have the justice system work in regards to your ability to say, I realize who is going to make the decision.
Well, these are clearly radical changes. I mean, in my earlier days of practice, radical change was some of the defense firms and plaintiffs' firm moved from, as we say, the street, Flagler Street, out to the edge of the Gables or Coconut Grove. And we marveled at, how are you going to get to the courthouse in 2 minutes? And when the judge calls, how can you, be there ready to pick a jury in 5 minutes, walk across the street? It's going to be so inconvenient. Where are you going to park? Little things like that. We couldn't understand how law firms would move out to the Gables, and then Brickell got built up, and we thought that, that was a terrible move because you had that long, hot walk from the courthouse over to Brickell, okay? So now the idea that you would just sit in a shirt and coat and go to court over the telephone or television from your home without even leaving the house, it almost, seems beyond comprehension. And so I'm wondering, has the practice become too casual? I mean, in my day, we'd all be sitting here in a suit and tie, and here we are, no ties. Where is it going for the hearings? Fort Lauderdale was one of the few jurisdictions, and way upstate Florida did too, but starting in June until Labor Day, the lawyers didn't have to wear a tie. Dade County took them years to follow that. And I remember a lawyer being held in contempt because he didn't have a tie, because one of the judges didn't like that idea, or a lady lawyer having too short a dress or something. Now, nobody would even think of something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Is this lack of discipline better, worse, or does it not make any difference?
No, I think it's shown an effect on the profession, because the idea, for the first, 12 years of my career, I wore a suit every single day. I hated the dry cleaning bill, but I wore a suit and tried to figure out how many times I could wear that suit without having to pay for it to get pressed again, right? But, and during the summer, you sweated through your stuff, it was brutal. But the problem is, because there's not a need for them to sort of get the profession on, put the suit on, I think that changes the mentality to some degree. I think that's lessened some of the professionalism. I contemplated a couple of years ago whether or not we were going to enact a rule in our firm about making everybody wear at least a coat and tie, or at least a coat. And the overwhelming response was, that's draconian, that not necessary, that what people liked about the office was that we were a little bit casual. There's no t-shirt and shorts, but they don't have to wear a suit every day. And so, but now I talk to other people in other firms, and none of them wear suits. Even in defense, it's sort of business casual is sort of accepted. But again, I think that changes the dynamic of, I wake up on a Monday morning, put my suit on. You sort of dress for, success. You dress for your profession.
Sure.
And
I even
that's
in my
gone.
day, the defense firms on Flagler Street all piled out at 12 o'clock and went down to Bert Hines or Woolworths and had lunch, had their own table there, and they all had dark suits and either a white or a blue shirt. I mean, there weren't even striped shirts. And, now it's completely different. So, I see that when I come into the office, and the ease with which they can be casual and get called to a hearing because they're going to do it either Zoom or on the
Right.
telephone, that they don't really have to be prepared. We always had an extra shirt or a coat and tie in the office if you weren't dressed up, for fear that you'd get called to have to either go on something on your own or have to cover somebody else's in the office who got stuck at a deposition or who got sick or who knows what, and you'd have to be properly dressed. It seems that the electronic age has eliminated that fear, but created its own new best beast, so to speak. I kind of wonder.
You touched on it. I mean, I remember when I eventually got to the point of I wasn't wearing a suit every day. I had a suit and tie in the closet of my office because of what you said. I didn't know if I could get called suddenly for an afternoon hearing, or the judge could say, we're gonna have a hearing on this motion today, or even start a trial. And so I always had an extra suit and a tie and a shirt ready to go in the class. I mean, it just was there always. And there were a few times I had to use it. I'm Tom Morgan with the Morgan Law Group. I want to say thank you for listening to this podcast of Trial and Error. If you want to find out more, or you want to check out more podcasts, go to our website, policyadvocate.com, and stay tuned for more podcasts in the future.